Around. I'm sure that sounds a little better. It says you are live, so that must mean we're live.
How exciting. Hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Grateful, Ready, Open, Willing. I'm Arnold Mangioli, and I could not be happier than I am today to bring you Jennifer KUMIYAMA. Jennifer is a longtime friend and someone very, very special to me and in my life. She is one of the most fabulous human beings I have ever known, and I'm just so excited to share her with you tonight. So, Jennifer, do you want to tell us? Oh, by the way, just a full disclosure, Jennifer and I decided we weren't going to have like prepared questions or anything. We were just going to kind of invite you into our conversation. You can make comments and you can ask questions and include yourself in our conversation. But just to remind everybody, unless you have a StreamYard account, it's going to come up as Facebook user. So if you type your name in at the beginning of your comment, then we'll know who you are. Otherwise, it'll show up anonymously. So just to know that. All right. So all of that said, Jennifer, tell us about you.
Hi, Arnie. Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer. A lot of my friends call me Kumi. I met Arnold when he casted Aladdin the Musical Spectacular at the Disneyland Resort in 2002. I was born with a disability called arthrogryposis, which requires me to use a wheelchair daily. I have a caregiver that helps me do everyday things like get ready, cook, things around the house and things of that nature. And my number one passion is performing, but I'm also a disability advocate. And I'm really happy to be here with you, Arnold, on the ADA celebratory day of their 31st anniversary.
Yes. So for anyone who may not know, today is the 31st anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disability Act. And one of our group members, actually, Josette Mishi Owens, is the wife of Jeffrey Owens. She's actually a wonderful human being in her own right, and an actress and a mom and all kinds of great things. But she pointed out in the chat about this upcoming event that Jeffrey's dad, Major Owens, was a congressperson who actually manned the floor on this particular, the passage of this act, and was a big supporter. So that's kind of a wonderful thing. And also today, the Biden-Harris administration made a proclamation, which was really nice. It's so refreshing to have a year of things being kind of like the way we remember America being. That's been kind of amazing. So they made a proclamation about specifically commemorating this anniversary of the ADA, and also expanded many of the rights of peoples with disability. Jeff Max, it is on. We can see you. Hang on, there's a way for me to do this. There we are. Jeff Max, it's on.
Oh, bub. Hello, bub. We can see you. Oh.
So anyway, lots of wonderful things are happening. So let's. But here's the thing. I just want to say to everybody, I've been looking for a way to get Jennifer on here for like a year that we've been doing this. I guess it's over a year now, right? And I know we tried to get in the race equality discussion that we did early on in the Black Lives Matter movement. We tried to get you on, and something else came up that exact day, so we weren't able to have you there. And I thought about the Asian American women of the theater, and then I thought, you know what? It just has to be Jennifer KUMIYAMA night. That's what it has to be. So yeah, I know you. I know that you use a wheelchair, but at the same time, I think of you as a performer at a talent level where it's not like you have one of the best voices of anybody I've ever known who happens to use a wheelchair. You have one of the best voices of any performer I've ever known. So that is a joy. And I'm not alone in that, folks. Do you want to tell the story of Idina Menzel and how you ended up at the Broadway Cares? I got to just put Jeff's comment up.
Jeffy, we know you're at the DMV. Yes, this is the time, bub. You're right on time.
Glad you're here. We love you.
Yes, we do. I was fortunate enough to do an episode of Undercover Boss in 2018, and that's how I actually met Idina Menzel. And one of the outcomes of being on that show was that I got to sing with her. at Broadway's Broadway Care Equity Fights AIDS Easter Bonnet. So in I think it was 2019, maybe the year before the pandemic,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, she and NBC flew my family out to New York, and we participated in this amazing, amazing fundraiser that I've never been to a Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS event, and I was just so humbled to be a part of it. So that's where we met, and we actually got to sing For Good together on the Lion King stage, which is the Minskoff on Broadway.
That was pretty incredible. Yeah, and I've told you this story, but my partner is somebody who is always like he's filled with childlike wonder, and he's always so excited about everything. And whenever somebody says like, and soon we'll have Donna here, he'll be like, oh, it's your friend Donna Murphy. And I'll be like, no, it's not Donna Murphy. Donna Murphy's not going to be here at this thing. Or, if somebody says, and we'll be hearing from Audra later, he'll be going, oh, Audra McDonald. And I'll be like, Audra McDonald's not going to be at this event doing this. That doesn't make any sense. So that we were sitting at that performance, because I go to all the Broadway Cares events, Red Bucket Follies, formerly Gypsy of the Year, and also Easter Bonnet. And he happened to come to that one with me, and we were sitting together. And when Idina said, so I met this very special person in doing a TV show named Jennifer, he leaned over and said to me, it's Jennifer KUMIYAMA. And I said, oh, it's not Jennifer KUMIYAMA. She's in California.
I love him.
She's not here. And he's like, no, it's Jennifer KUMIYAMA. I'm like, will you stop? He does this all the time. It makes me crazy. And then when Idina said Jennifer KUMIYAMA, I was like, oh, so exciting. I had no idea you were going to be there. It's just so wonderful.
It was amazing. It was really awesome. I will never forget that moment. And then being able to see you afterwards, not even knowing that you were there, of course, was like the cherry on top. Amazing. Super fortunate that happened.
That was so great.
Yeah, and I love Damon's optimism in everything. He's such a treat to be around too.
I'm a pretty lucky guy. It's true. But yeah, I want to point out, if anybody doesn't know Jennifer's voice, I actually posted in the group in Grateful, Ready, Open, Willing, the video of Jennifer and Idina on stage doing the duet from Wicked, For Good. And it's very nice to see Jennifer hold her own with Idina Menzel vocally. I mean, it's really quite a treat. So, so we met, as Jennifer said, in when I was casting Aladdin. And this is a great story that's worth sharing. So we had an open call, and we also had appointments, and we didn't know each other at that point. And it was a long day, and it was in Los Angeles. And toward the end of the day, it was toward the very end of the day, you came in your wheelchair, and I immediately was in love with you because you just shine that light that you shine. You are, every time you enter a room, I feel like you're so happy to be there that I can only be happy to be there too, And you dazzled us. You sang a song that was just lovely, because that was the requirement, is just come and sing 16 bars of your own song. And some of the other people at the audition table, when I said, so Jennifer, are you able to come back tomorrow? And one of our favorite words, yes. It was all yes energy. Yes, absolutely. And if we give you some sides, can you learn a song for tomorrow? And I remember noting that it was late in the day, and that we had to give you an appointment for early the next day because everything had booked up by that point. Mm-hmm. And you were like, yes, sure. And, I'll be there. And some of the people, hello, Ellen, we're always glad to have you. Some of the people I was with were like kind of freaked out right away and said, and I understand that it's, something that's different or unfamiliar. Doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just sometimes people react to something unfamiliar. And so they were like, well, what are you doing? I mean, how can you call that person back? I don't even know if we have accommodations. I'm like, you're Disney, you have accommodations, so I'm not worried about that. I'm sure you're up to legal code. And they were like, well, this isn't even a performer. This is like someone who sings in a church or something. I said, well, relax. I've asked for a callback. We haven't cast the show yet. We're just in the process. And the next morning you came in, and I will never forget this. Everybody else was sort of stumbling over the sheet music and figuring out the tune and trying to deliver. And you came in and you had no music in your hands and you knocked it out of the park. You just sang the whole thing.
I was determined. I was like, this is it. This is it. I feel like when you arrive at a place where you're supposed to be, and whatever higher power you believe in, I believe that God put me there at that exact moment in time. And I was like, don't mess it up. So I was happy to know it. I went home and I studied, and it was the whole, it's so funny that you remember it that way, because I remember it a different way where I messed up a couple times and I had to restart. But it was one of the best audition experiences of my life, not only because I ended up booking the job, but because for the first time in a really long time, it felt okay to just be me as is. And as a person with a physical disability or any disability, that is not often a space that we are asked to come into in this industry, and I was just happy. So yeah, thank you. I can't, the opportunity still, I mean, the whole experience, I was there for 13 years. The whole experience was the best experience of my entire life.
And you got to know such wonderful people there. Jeff Max, who's here, and Mark Cedric Smith, who I'm sure is still trying to find us. Hello, Mark. We love you. Yeah, and they, so many of those people would comment to me about getting to know you in the show and how thrilled they were that you were there and what a great experience you were for them. I want to point out two things about that story, though, that I think are really important. And one is for all actors to note. One is what you just said about you remember the story as you messed up and stopped a few times. I don't remember that at all. Mm-hmm. I remember you knocked it out of the park, because what I very specifically remember was as soon as the song ended, I turned to the other people at the table and said, well, now we can rule out that idea that this is just someone who sings in a church. Now we know this is a professional actress. Mm-hmm. So now let's take it to the next step with the sides. And that's what we did. And we went through each step of it. The other thing that I think is so important to remember is you got yourself there. There was an opportunity. You didn't know how it was going to go. And it was, I'm sure, not convenient for you to get your accommodation, to get a van or whatever you needed to bring the wheelchair and there and back and get yourself in that audition room. That was not a small feat. And you got to the audition. When I hear actors sometimes, especially younger actors, say, oh, I decided not to go. Oh, I realized there'd be so many people there. It wasn't worth going to the audition. I just shake my head and I think, that's not how it works.
No.
You got to be, what is that saying about God will get you to shore, but you must be in the boat pointed towards shore and rowing.
Mm-hmm. And rowing.
And you were rowing, girl. That was just so amazing.
It was really awesome.
It was a process, and we learned a lot too. We learned an awful lot. For example, I didn't know anything about hiring someone in a wheelchair for that particular situation, and I learned that the ADA that we celebrate the anniversary of today requires that any accommodations that are made must also be made accessible to people with physical disabilities. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, as it was explained to me, we would not need to, if there were no buses that picked anyone up to bring them to the theater at the park, we would not be required to specially send a bus for you. Mm-hmm. But if we had a bus picking people up, we would be required to make sure that bus could accommodate your wheelchair. So in other words, it's only what's being offered to everybody else. It's not a special accommodation situation. And truly, it turned out to be not a big deal once we understood it, Mm-hmm. Something that was tricky for us was the show was dual cast because Disney was running it. I can't remember what it was, but like 16 performances a week or something. 19?
Yeah, it was in the beginning, it was 4 shows a day, 7 days a week. So that was a lot.
28 shows a week. Yes.
That was a lot.
And as I recall, it was done under AGVA or AGMA. I think it was AGVA.
Mm-hmm.
AGVA, yeah.
Yeah.
They were able to do that, right?
Mhm.
And yes, Ellen, thank you. Dedication and determination are everything. Yeah, and talent is nice too when that happens. That's good too, and you brought them all. But the lost train of thought. Where was I? Oh.
Okay, reasonable accommodations. Disney was very helpful in making those reasonable accommodations for me to
Good.
Do everything that I could at my job to set me up for success as a performer and as an employee of the company. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm glad for that. Yes, I remember now. So we were talking about the issue of if it's 28 shows a week and we have a double cast and you came into the cast, does that mean we have to find another person who uses a wheelchair who could do that role? Because I totally understood that it would not be acceptable to find a person who doesn't use a wheelchair and just sit them in a wheelchair at the performances you were at. That would not be okay. That's like blackface kind of thinking. So
Yeah.
we don't do that. So then it would be a case. And I remember saying to the producers, I'll find one. We found her. We can find another one. And I'm thinking, this is one of the most talented people I've ever met. I don't know if I can find another one. But then look, Ali Stroker came along, you know, and I auditioned her several times early on, but she wasn't there yet. She wasn't graduated from NYU yet. And so, you know, that became an issue. And fortunately, it was Francesca Zambello who was directing and Lynn Taylor Corbett who was choreographing, who were so helpful. And Annie Hamburger, of course, who was producing and was just one of my favorite people. Annie's so great. I remember at one point she called me. I picked up the phone and the first thing I said was, are you aware that there are 19 million Americans with disability currently living in this country? And that if we cast Jennifer, she'll probably get on the cover of like Disability Magazine and attract you an extra audience of 19 million people who wouldn't come otherwise. This is before I said hello. And Annie, we've known each other for like decades, you know, and Annie goes, all right, look, I just want to say one thing to you. I just want to say if there's ever a war, I want to make sure that you're on my side. That's all I care about, okay? But there was no stopping. It was just meant to happen. And it was just glorious. So yeah, so what Francesca and Lynn and Annie came up with, to their credit, was your role in the show at the performances you weren't performing would basically just be brought out of it so that the cast without those sections and those parts, the way you do with any show where, you know, you have absences and you're down a performer and you need to figure out how to very quickly restage something and put it in for the next performance. So that's what was built into it, which is totally great. So Jennifer, you're not only an actress, I wouldn't say just, but not only an actress and a performer and a TV performer and a stage performer and a movie performer. You also, what's this AD.6 I see after your name these days?
Well, after Aladdin closed, I began volunteering at my local councilwoman's office. And that's how I got started in politics. I mean, prior to that, I was a commissioner for disabilities for the city of Long Beach, where I live in California. And I've just become super involved in it. I, this past year, was just elected to be a delegate to the California Democratic Party for Assembly District 70. So that's really exciting.
It's great.
Yes. And I'm just really even more, I feel like, I think after Aladdin closed, it was a good experience for me to find something else that I could be passionate about. And local government is definitely one of those things. Local government to me is the most important. And also, it's the space where you can make the most impact, right? Is right where you live. So yeah, that's what I do now. I actually work full time for a firm that works to get women of color, and people from the LGBTQ and disability communities elected into office. So I have a really, really newfound, like, I guess, how do you say, love for helping people in this new capacity, and making sure that the lives of people with disabilities is always at the forefront of the minds of people who we elect into office and to people who currently serve in office. So it's exciting.
I saw pictures of you in your social media at the beach. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, yes. Huntington Beach, one of our clients, uh, is a Huntington Beach council member, and he said, "Hey, we're implementing the Moby mat at a beach, which is a mat that you can roll on. You put on the sand, and you can roll over it in your wheelchair or whatever your mobility device is, or even your baby stroller." It's just step by step, people are realizing that we don't really live in an equitable place for people with disabilities, of all disabilities. And in addition to that, we're not thinking about the intersectionality of disability as a whole. When we talk about things like Black Lives Matter, are we also making sure that we speak up for our Black disabled lives? When we talk about women's rights, are we also talking about women with disability and their rights? And the list goes on and on. So it's really awesome to see people that you help get elected work toward an equitable life for people with disabilities, especially their constituency.
Yeah, it's and it's a remarkable thing. And Lance made a comment earlier. I presume you saw. Go delegate! Yeah, I'm with you, Lance. Yeah, it is. It's an extraordinary thing. Do you know the story of Sue Thomas? Sue Thomas, FBI.
No, I don't.
So this was a few years ago, and I love this story. It's from my work with the Alliance for Inclusion in the Arts, which was formerly the Non-Traditional Casting Project when we used that terminology, but a wonderful organization that has made incredible things happen, Tony Award-winning organization. So Sue Thomas FBI was a TV series. They were hoping to make it a movie, but it ended up becoming a TV series. And it was a story of a deaf woman, Sue Thomas, and it's based on a true story. This actually happened. So government agencies have a certain requirement to hire a certain percentage of people with disabilities. So yes, Ellen, I'm with you. And so I can't remember exactly what it is, 15% or 5% or 10%, somewhere in there. And so Sue Thomas was a woman who was deaf, and she was hired by the FBI as one of those disability hires or affirmative action hires or whatever the terminology is. And she was given a desk job that was okay, just put her here and whatever. And they gave her some papers to shuffle back and forth and just kind of left her there without much to do. And she happened to be, as I've heard the story, she happened to be on her way to the ladies' room. And she walked by the office of like one of the top FBI guys, and he had another top FBI agent in the office with him. And they were struggling over this computer screen, and she could kind of see what they were struggling over because of the angle as she walked by. And they were just shaking their heads because they couldn't figure it out. They were trying to solve this major crime, and they had video footage from the days of video cameras in the in the lobbies or where the safe was or whatever the thing was. And they were trying to decipher from the video footage what they were saying because there was no sound in those days on those video surveillance cameras. And she walked by, and very quickly in sign language, she tried to explain to them that she could tell them what they were saying because she had always lip read. Mm-hmm. So she was lip reading them, and these guys were trying to figure out the words and making no progress on this for like days. And she just walked in and said, "Oh, they said their headquarters is at blah, 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 and they're meeting at blah, 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 and the next crime they're going to commit is blah, blah, blah." And she just gave them all the information.
Check that show out.
It's awesome. Yeah, I don't know where you'd find it online, but it ran for I think 2 seasons maybe, and it's just remarkable. And the show was thoroughly committed. They hired, I think it was 60% deaf and hard of hearing performers, and actors, and even backstage and crew people, because they were really true to that mission and that spirit. But just the story of Sue Thomas, like whenever anybody says, "Oh, affirmative action hires, what a waste of money," blah blah blah, I'm like, you know what? You never know until you give that opportunity. You don't know where you're going to find a Jennifer Kumiyama and somebody who could like knock things out of the park in a way that you don't know because you're not looking.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
remarkable.
There's a lot of talent within the disability community across the world, that for so long was not being tapped into, because people with disabilities are automatically assumed to be incapable, which is not the case. So I like to think of disability as our creator giving us different abilities that we can help each other through life. Because if everybody knew how to do everything, nobody would need anyone. So I think that is where I like to keep that, and it gives me hope, and it gives me a sense of like knowing exactly why I was born this way. So
Yeah, I mean, there is definitely, I am familiar with your superpowers,
oh,
and
thank
I
you.
do believe that those things happen, that when we lose an ability to do one thing, something else kicks in. And I've experienced your enlightenment and your fabulous sense of humor and all of the great gifts that you've shared in so many ways. With all of us. So between your political work now and Aladdin then, you also had a little bit of a fascinating journey with Miss Wheelchair California and Miss Wheelchair America.
Yes, actually, Aladdin was a huge push behind me competing for Miss Wheelchair California. And I was crowned in 2010, which was the 20th anniversary of the signing of the ADA, which was so long ago.
Well, that happens.
Yeah, I know. But I think my job at Disney really gave me a platform to, and a desire to want to like encourage young people to not only like, don't stop at the daydream, like keep going and keep pushing. And there will be a ton of people along the way who will tell you no, but that can't deter you from reaching your dreams and your goals. I mean, for God's sake, I know that a former Miss Wheelchair New York, who's a registered nurse, who's been recognized across the nation for, being a working nurse from her wheelchair during a pandemic. So I think the possibilities are endless, and the only person that could really stop you from doing what you really want to in life is yourself.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, go ahead.
you took that a step further, because
Yeah,
wasn't there a foundation that you just in your
yes.
spare time created?
In my spare time, because there's so much of it. After I competed for Miss Wheelchair and won the year after, the program, the California program, was going to come to an end. So I was like, well, I feel like this program helped me be a better advocate, and I feel like it's necessary for this program to exist and thrive. So we started the Miss Wheelchair California Foundation, and which is now morphed into the Miss Wheelchair California Leadership Institute. And all of our title holders compete for Miss Wheelchair America. In 2011, I competed and I got first runner up, which was really good. It was a really hard competition, and it was an amazing experience. I'm still involved. I'm actually going within 2 weeks to Michigan for their next competition, and it's always a great time. It's always so awesome to see so many people with the same but very different advocacy goals. So it's awesome to know that the work is being done, and that we're still breeding advocates, disability advocates, year after year.
It's
Yeah.
just amazing. You're just amazing.
Oh, no, you're amazing.
It's truly some extraordinary things happening there. So, oh my God, there's a zillion things I want to talk to you about. So let's get back to the ADA thing. As I understand it, the passing of the ADA, it was grounded in there were like 4 core principles, right? There was full participation, that people with disabilities would be invited to full participation in employment or other activities, etc. Equal opportunity, which, yes, please, let's have that, right? Independent living, like you said, you have a caregiver who helps you with meals and things you can't do, and economic self-sufficiency. So those were the ideas. And my understanding is that what the proclamation Biden signed today extends a lot of that, a lot of the funding and a lot of the resources that are available now to Americans with disabilities have been significantly extended, which is so cool. So I'm curious, are you, like, I'm aware of some things from when the ADA passed from beforehand when I was a kid. Like, I've noticed on the streets in New York City, on the curbs are all dented so that wheelchairs can go down and up easily. I remember as a kid seeing like a wheelchair having to, I would often help. I learned that stuff early on. My mom would be like, "Help those people." Yeah, okay. But then what happens is all of a sudden, you're pushing a cart, or you're going to a show and you have a big, like a set of speakers on wheels, and suddenly life is easier for everybody. So I'm wondering, in your life experience, did things change for you as you remember way back from before and after the ADA, or over time?
I actually do remember right off the bat. So we moved from one county to another this summer that the ADA was passed, and my stepmom went to register us at a brand new school in a brand new city, like an hour away from where we lived. And I remember the school nurse looking over the counter and asking me, "Do you want to be fully mainstreamed into regular education classrooms, or do you want to stay in special ed?" And before that wasn't an option, right? Like, it was like, "Oh, you have a disability, go to special ed." And they would mainstream you for portions of the day, but not fully mainstream you. And I chose to be mainstream fully. And I think even at 10 years old, like, being able to have that kind of, ability to make your own decisions for yourself, or not just the ability, but I think the school secretary's question was the most powerful to me. I did make that choice on my own. She asked me, not my mom, which I thought was really exciting as well. Especially at 10, I was like, "What? I got this." But I think I recognized right off the bat, growing up while the ADA was, first being implemented into every aspect of our life, like, I slowly started to see the change, curb cutouts, like you were talking about, wider doors, accessible bathrooms in public, things like that, access to public transportation, which was huge. I don't know if the history of public transportation and people with disabilities is really, really amazing. And things like that. People with disabilities didn't even have access to their capital, their state capital, or the nation's capital. So there's this huge historic moment within our history called Capitol Crawl, where people would leave their mobility devices at the end of the steps and crawl up the steps.
Wow.
To meet with legislators. And same thing with transportation. People with mobility devices would lay in front of buses that were operating a route to stop traffic, to let people know nobody rides the bus until we ride the bus. And these are services that we're talking about that were paid for out of people's tax money. And a lot of people with disabilities who do pay taxes, and so it's like there's a whole community of people who are paying for other people to have the ability to take public transportation, or visit your legislator, or go to a library, who didn't have access to those basic needs. So I'll never forget. I'll always remember, the advocates that came before me in my time, and just be so grateful for them to risk their lives. That was literally risking their lives, for the things that I have access to today.
That's just fantastic. I was not aware of a whole portion of that. That's really great stuff. Thank you for sharing.
It really is. And if you want to learn more about it, like a really great documentary that was actually produced by the Obamas, and it's on Netflix, and it's called Crip Camp.
Crip Camp.
Crip Camp will give you the rundown and give you the basic history of what you need to know about disability history. So I fully suggest watching it. It's amazing.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that plug. Wow. And I'm curious, have you seen anything different like in the past 4 years? You're involved politically, so you probably have seen a lot of the intricacies. But I mean, just in the quality of your day to day life, has anything shifted or has the ADA managed to maintain itself?
Well, the ADA is 31 years and there's really no oversight. It's complaint driven, right? So we need oversight, number one. But to answer your question about the changes in the 4 years, yes. I see a lot of people who are in elected office, implementing more accessible parks, which are really important for our children, especially our children in dense neighborhoods that don't have access to play areas. Parks are sometimes people's only access to having an outdoor life. Transportation, uh, buses, everything, just everything. But recently I did have the opportunity to travel to Europe the summer before COVID happened. And it was really interesting to see like the dynamic of uh, what is normally accessible to me at home here in America versus, you know, um, people telling you that you have an accessible hotel, but not telling you that has one step to get in, in Paris. So like it's just those things, and I think that's made me more sensitive to acknowledge, the liberties that I and people like me are afforded to today. But we've still got a long way to go. Right now, there's a huge bill called Better Care, Better Jobs. And the passage of the bill would provide $400 billion for people who are cared for and their caregivers, because caregivers aren't nearly paid as much as they should be for the job that they do. And they're threatening to cut that in half. There's something to fight for every day, just as, and it's not just people with disabilities either. It's our LGBTQ community, our Black and brown communities. It's just another thing that we have to fight for. But I do notice that, in 4 years, uh, the things that certain things are becoming easier to ask for. But it would be an amazing, amazing thing to arrive at a moment where we wouldn't have to ask for things. It would just be recognized that, people are born into this world with disabilities, people age and they obtain disabilities, and people get into accidents, unfortunately, and obtain disabilities. Disability is an inevitable part of life.
Beautiful. I agree with Facebook user. We can't see your name, but I agree with you.
Thank
Um,
you.
I remember we had a conversation. It was when Stephen Hawking died. And there was a very beautiful cartoon, I thought, that showed up in social media, which had him leaving his wheelchair and walking into the clouds. And then there was a lot of backlash about that, and people saying this is so unfair to imply with this drawing that it's better to be able-bodied than use a wheelchair, and all of this hubbub started. And I just thought there was something beautiful about the freeing of the soul from our bodies for all of us in that. And I asked you your opinion about it, and I don't know, do you remember what you said? Because I do.
I don't really remember. What did I say?
Well, you just have such a beautiful and effortless way of explaining things to people and making them so universally understood. And you said, well, it's interesting because Stephen Hawking acquired his disability and using a wheelchair. I was born in this condition, so I don't know life without using this chair.
Mhm.
So, it might be different if it were for myself to say like, oh, now you can walk, because I've never had that. Whereas he did. So maybe the drawing is trying to imply that he's free of something that occurred during his lifetime. And
Yeah,
I just thought that was really powerful. Like to,
remember that conversation now. Yeah, I could see where people would see that, what would find that to be like an ableist sort of interpretation of life after death. But I think it varies from person to person. I don't want to blanket statement anything on anyone's behalf but my own. But that's exactly, I do remember telling you that, and that's how I felt.
yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine living life and obtaining a disability. Like how hard that shift is, because it's like it go to me in my mind, it would probably go from the world is your oyster to, well, the world is your oyster, but only this part. So I mean, I don't know. And also too, like, I'm just that kind of person that always not tries to, but I always see the other side of what, someone else could potentially be experiencing. I try to be sensitive to what other people experience in their own journey with disability and ability.
I love that. I remember when I was given the Media Access Award, and I brought you as my date.
Yes.
That, which was so nice. A Facebook user loves you so much.
Oh, I love you, Facebook user.
So again, for those who may have joined us late, if you don't have a StreamYard account, if you just type your name in at the beginning of your comment, we'll know who you are. But yes, some years ago I was awarded. Oh, you know what? It's there in the frame. That's
I was
it.
going to ask if that was it.
That's the award right there. Yeah. The California Governor's Committee on Employment of People with Disabilities Award. So that event was fantastic. And I remember Lance Roberts, yes! Let's go all the way. President KUMIYAMA.
So funny. I definitely appreciate that. But no mayor for me. I like to be behind the scenes, like calling the shots. Our mayor very much so calls a shot. He's a great mayor. But no, I don't think I could ever be mayor. That's just crazy.
Power broker. Go, go. I love it. Thank you, Janine. So I remember that event very specifically. You were my date, and my husband was also there. What really struck me about that event, I was so happy you said yes and you came with me. And one of the things that was such a new experience for me was at that event. It was a fancy event. I don't remember if it was exactly black tie, but it was formal. And we were like dressed to the nines and the whole thing. And it was at some big fancy, I don't know, maybe the Beverly Hills Hotel or something, and the big ballroom there, etc. And lots of celebrities, Barry Manilow and Montel Williams and all these people. And what I remember that was so startling for me to experience is there were more people at that event who used wheelchairs than there were people who didn't.
Yeah.
And the kind of traffic jams and things around little areas of the room. Mm-hmm. And it was so startling to me because I thought, this is what it's like. This is what you usually deal with. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting to deal with it now, where it's like, how do I navigate in a way that I can get around the room when there's all of this other kind of traffic? And it wasn't upsetting at all. It was actually a really enlightening moment to get to experience. That was fascinating. And that by itself was just amazing. I also remember that one of the little favors they had was Tylenol PM in little like pretty gauze bags. And I said, Jennifer, do you want a Tylenol PM? And you went, yeah! Like, let's take a few.
It's smart. Drinks to have a little Tylenol PM and then, wake up refreshed.
Just a little bit of fresh. But the thing that was so great was, again, because of the space and the number of wheelchairs, a younger girl passed you. She was in a wheelchair and she kind of passed you and turned and saw you and she recognized you and she said, you're in a Disney show. It's always been my dream to be in a Disney show, but until I met you, I didn't think it was possible. And your chair had already passed her, but you spun your head around and over your shoulder you said to her with the brightest light shining from you said, anything is possible. And I just thought, I can die now. That moment was like so worth living for. It was just, wow.
It's true. That's honestly how I believe, though. It's what I believe. But I think it has a lot to do with the way that I was raised, My parents were young. My parents were really young. Like my dad was 20 and my mom barely turned 19. And, what I have is very rare. I think the number is still 1 in 3,000, and they were like teenage parents. They had no idea what to do. And, thanks to my grandma, who was a nurse and, her teaching them the ropes, I think my family, and, being the oldest and being the only girl for 10 years is also really torturous. And it teaches you a lot about life. But like, they were always like, nope, you have the same chores and you'll learn how to do this and we'll figure it out together. And so I'm really grateful for the upbringing that I had.
I love that. Let's close with one more story about, I remember when Annie Hamburger and I had dinner on the Disney Island out in California at a restaurant there. And it was a Saturday night, and there were a bunch of women executives from Disney who were dining there. And Annie was familiar with this regular weekly dinner that they had socially. And she said, let me introduce you. And we went over there, and I met the woman who was the head of the parks at the time, Catherine something, I think. Mm-hmm. And when Annie introduced me and said I was the casting director that she was working with, she looked at me and she said, are you the person who put that girl in the wheelchair into our show? And I thought, oh boy, is this going to be an uncomfortable conversation? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, I need to speak to you. And she came over to me and said, this is what the parks need to be about. There is a woman who has worked here in the parks for a very long time. She's been with us for many years. And she has a child who uses a wheelchair. And she told me a story that she actually came up to me to tell me that I think it was her son, was trying to figure out what he could do with his life. And he had figured out that when he grew up, he could be a busboy in the restaurants in the park, because he figured out that the height of his wheelchair was the height of the tables in the restaurants. And he said he could clean them that way. Mm-hmm. And when he saw Aladdin and saw you, he had a whole different vision for his life. And he realized that he wanted to perform and do lots of wonderful things. And I was not prepared for that conversation turning me into a puddle, like right there on the floor. But it just, it's just a good illustration of how inspiring you are in your work and your life, and the things you open up just by living life the way you do.
I was really lucky to have you in the room.
I was really lucky to have you in the room.
I'm not crying, you're crying.
Jennifer, do you want to say anything in closing to the world?
Oh, go get them. Don't let anybody tell you no. I'm sure they'll tell you no once, twice, maybe 3 times, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Keep going. Keep going. And if you need a friend, holler. Keep going.
I love you so much.
I love you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Happy ADA Day, everybody. Happy Americans with Disabilities Act Day.
Happy ADA Day. And I think if I click end broadcast here, the broadcast is going to end, but you and I can still chat. Okay. So goodbye, everybody. So fun to see you. Happy ADA Day.